greet each other one more time in the name of Christ. Look to your neighbor and say, "You are looking good, those old duds." If you are a visitor, I welcome all of you in the name of Jesus. If you're a visitor, we don't dress like this every Sunday. I do not robe every Sunday. I'm not a rober, so this is my throwback. But we're celebrating 185 years of faithfulness, of the Lord's faithfulness through and in this congregation. The Lord has been present and at work for 185 years, and that's something to celebrate. And as a way of kind of kicking off Throwback Sunday, we have a little angelic voice that's going to kind of get us started thinking about our history.
School days, dear old golden rule days, reading and writing and arithmetic, taught to the tune of a hickory stick. You were my cleaning calico, I was your bashful barefoot beau, and you wrote on my slate, I love you, Joe, when we were a couple of kids.
Now, can't you just imagine Mike singing that? It is good to have you here. In Hosea's prophecy, Hosea says this. He says that the Lord's coming to us is as certain as the dawn, as certain as the sun rises. The Lord will come in faithfulness. The Lord's coming to us in faithfulness is as sure as the spring rains. The spring rains that come to water the earth, to bring forth fruit from the ground, to bring out the colors of the spring. That is a sign of the Lord's faithfulness. And here we are back at Mount Pisgah for another day to worship God and to gain perspective. We come to this Mount Pisgah in order to see the evidence of the Lord's faithfulness. And so we're glad that you're here. Do we have some announcements, Kim?
We do.
I want to thank you for welcoming me here and for utterly confusing me as to where I am and what era I am in as well. But just to tell you a little bit about myself, I'm Chris. I'm from New Jersey. I've heard it all coming out here about New Jersey, that we are the armpit, all about the Sopranos. But I'm welcomed here by John, who's a gangster this morning. And I've heard New Jersey, even though I have never actually heard that term in New Jersey, but it still works. I have my beautiful wife here, Nikki. We met doing group work camps all over the country, setting up camps that youth camps. And we have our daughter, Nora, and she is 2 years old and has a lot of energy, and we have one on the way in November. But what I'm going to be teaching about this morning is the parable of the talents. And I believe that this parable has great implications on our journey in faith and what we're supposed to do in this world today. You see, parables have they're stories that were told by Jesus. And if you were a passerby, just kind of half listening to these stories, you would hear them and you'd be like, okay, they're okay teaching, that's pretty good. But parables had several layers to them. And so Jesus told a regular story, but if you were really listening and you were really digging deep into this story, you would notice that there's an underlayer of something that is amazing. And Jesus taught these spiritual truths through these parables. I'm going to read this parable. It comes from Matthew. It's Matthew 25, verse 14. For it is as if a man, going on a journey, summoned his slaves and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, just 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. The one who had received the 5 talents went off at once and traded with them, and made 5 more talents. In the same way, the one who had the 2 talents made 2 more talents. But the one who had received the 1 talent went off and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. Then the one who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 more talents, saying, Master, you handed me over 5 talents. See, I have made 5 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things, and I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. And the one with the 2 talents also came forward, saying, Master, you have handed over me 2 talents. See, I have made 2 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. Then the one who had received the 1 talent also came forward, saying, Master, I knew that you were a harsh man, reaping where you do not sow, and gathering where you did not scatter seed. So I was afraid. I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours. But his master replied, You wicked and lazy slave, you knew, did you, that I reap where I did not sow, and gather where I did not scatter? Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and on my return I would have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him, and give it to the one who has 10 talents. For all those who have more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who have nothing, even with what they have, will be taken away. And as for this worthless slave, throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So we take a look at this talent, and I have to really what is a talent? What do they mean by this? And so when Jesus was talking and he was saying talent, it's actually a unit of measurement in weight. And in the first century, when they used talents, they always used silver. So a talent of silver. Now, a talent of silver is worth 6,000 denarii. Now, I had no idea what a denarii was. What's a denarii? A denarii, in equivalent to them, is 1 day's wage. So 1 talent is equal to 6,000 days' wages. So some scholars say that it's actually equal to $1 million. So imagine someone giving you $1 million and you are in charge of it. And so what the owner wanted them to do, he said, here's the talent, here's 5 talents, so he gave $5 million to one, $2 million to another, and $1 million to the next. He wanted them to invest it. I don't know if any of you have ever seen Shark Tank, but that's basically what they wanted him to do. They wanted him to take this money and start investing it into different businesses and different ideas so that this money will kind of make more money. And this one man who had the 1 talent looked at it. And he's like, I only have 1 talent. So he took it and he buried it. Now, remember I said about passerbys hearing this story? Most people listening to this story were from Judaic standards would say, okay, he saved the money, he hid it, okay, well done, that's okay, that's something that I would do. So Jesus was teaching something, there was something much deeper going on. As we read further, Jesus is really saying what a talent is a gift. A gift that we didn't ask for, that we are supposed to invest back into the kingdom. You know, I think a lot of us look at the talents that we're given. And we kind of look down the aisle of other people and we say, it's just not enough. I remember when I was younger, I wanted in the worst way to be able to do music. My brother was into music, he was in the band. My sister, she could do music. And the biggest, most popular thing in 4th grade at that time was to play an instrument and be in the band. And so I gave it a shot. I said, yeah, try the trumpet. That trumpet will work. And weeks and weeks go by and I was terrible at the trumpet. Absolutely awful. And so the teacher came by and said, well, Chris, maybe the trumpet is not necessarily your thing. And I was like, yeah, you're probably right, He said, you want to do anything else? Maybe there's a different instrument that you're really into. I was like, yeah, you know what? I didn't want to do the trumpet anyway. I want to do the drums. That's what I wanted. Yeah, the drums, that's more me. And so weeks went by and I couldn't pick up the drums either, and my parents didn't really like my practicing. It was not very nice to the house or the cats. But the big thing is, in 4th grade, is that if you get the lessons right, you get to be in the band. And really what it meant is you got to skip another class. That's what I wanted. But at the time, I thought I really wanted to be in the band. And so I was like, they're saying, you're not really good at this. I was like, I just want to be in the band, and I wanted to be in the concert. And they said, all right, here is some cymbals. Like, nobody can mess up the Star Spangled Banner. Here's the cymbals. During the practice, they actually asked me to put the cymbals down. I ruined the Star Spangled Banner. It ended up that I just played the cowbell for 4 beats a measure. And then that year they said, I think that music is not your thing. We all have different talents, different things that we're able to do. Music is definitely not mine. And this man who got the one talent, I imagine that he stood there with the one talent and he looked, because it said they got the talents according to their own abilities. So he looks down the line and sees the guy with the 5 talents, the guy with the 2 talents, and he's like, I only have 1 talent. Why don't we look at the story in a different way? What if he never knew what the other people had? What if he just looked at his 1 talent? Imagine if I just gave you $1 million. You would say, I just got $1 million. This is incredible. You wouldn't compare yourself to the others around. You see, we have these skills, and God has given them. He has blessed us with these skills because they are to be invested back into the kingdom and to be used. And very often, we just look and say, it's just not enough. We have all different talents. Some of us are really good at business and finances, and the church needs that. Some of us are really good at music, not me, but you, maybe. We have all these talents. Some of us are just really good listeners. You see, our world doesn't have a lot of good listeners. Our world has a lot of good talkers. But some of us, maybe our talent is just being able to listen. You see, if you are not sure what your talent is, and maybe you come to this community and you're like, I don't know where I could help. Well, then you're not fully connecting with the community as much as you think. See, the job of the community is to gather together. And you're supposed to be affirming and uplifting each other and saying, you know what, I don't have this talent, but you do. You can use this in this community. We're supposed to be lifting each other up and sharing our gifts. We don't all have all the gifts that you need. And some of us have more gifts than others, but all gifts are needed. And maybe you just need to be told that you are enough. Maybe you've been thinking about it, and you're like, I'm not enough. But that's the community's job, that we're supposed to lift each other up. The next thing that we see in this parable is that you cannot play it safe. You see, this man who got the 1 talent, he quickly went and buried it. He buried it. He didn't want anybody to see it. He didn't want to lose it. And he was scolded by the owner. The owner yelled at him. And his response, he was defiant. He was prideful. Kind of like when we get caught in our junk. We just kind of protect it. Like, no, that's not me. I didn't do it. But really, at the root, if you looked at this guy, and you took a real good look at who he was, you would say he is filled with fear. Why did he bury this money when he was supposed to invest it? He was scared. He didn't want anything to happen. He didn't want to get yelled at. But what happened? He got yelled at. You see, the guy that had the most risk in this whole thing was actually the guy with the 5 talents, not the one. The one who had a lot of talents and all the things that the owner gave to him had more risk. You see, we live with the same fear. We dress up. We put on this facade in our world that says, there's nothing wrong here, nothing going on here. But inside, we know that we're hurting. We know that we're insecure. Maybe we feel inadequate. Maybe we feel like what we have is not enough. We see people with new jobs, new hobbies, or maybe working out and taking care of themselves, and we look and we say, we wish we were like that. And so we are the guy who's staring down the line at the other people with the talents. You see, I have that fear. When I was younger, right out of college, it was right first starting college, I saw this group work camps, this possibility to take a job where I go out to Colorado, they train me, and then they send me all over the country to do mission work. I mean, it was the greatest experience where you can travel to all these places you've never been to before. And so I actually did all the interviews. It was like 4 interviews. It was a ridiculous amount, and I got the job. They said, it's yours. About a month or 2 before I was set and ready to go, I got scared. I got scared that I was going to mess up, that I wasn't good enough for this job, and I quit before I even started. Just quit. I said, forget it. I can't do it. Luckily, I decided to do it again the next year, and it changed my life. It really did. You see, we have these fears that we are not enough, that the things that God has given us are not enough, but they are. See, there's a story in the Gospels about the disciples are in a boat, and there's a whole bunch of them are on this boat, and they shipped off, and Jesus said, go on ahead without me, and here they are on the ship, and the water starts getting really rocky, and it's foggy, and they see this figure walking on top of the water. And so they're like, is that a ghost? And it gets closer, and they notice that it's Jesus. And so Jesus is walking on the water towards them, and they're all terrified. But Peter's like, Jesus, if you want me to come out to you, just ask me. And Jesus says, come on out. And so Peter starts walking on the water, and then this wind comes, and he starts to sink. And he gets scared, and he jumps back towards the boat, and Jesus says, why did you doubt? You see, every time I've always looked at that story, I was always like, stupid Peter, you are so fearful, like scaredy cat, like, how could Peter be so scared and full of fear? And then I thought about it. There was a lot of people in that boat. Peter was actually the only one to get out of the boat. He took a step of faith to go out on the water. Yeah, he got scared. He wasn't perfect. Jesus was there to pick him up. But I always looked at that story the wrong way. Peter was the bravest man in that boat. You know, Peter ended up being the rock that the church was built on. He ended up going, and some stories in Acts, Peter would go into a temple and burst open the doors and just run in and just tell them of the love of Jesus. That is not someone filled with fear. That is someone that has a desire for the gospel to get out there to use his gifts. We have to take a step of faith like Peter did. Maybe it's connecting with this community in a different way. Maybe you've been on the outskirts. Maybe you want to step in and be more of a leader, and you feel like God is calling you to be a leader. Maybe there's been that coworker that you know you should have been talking to, and you're somewhere in you says, I need to talk to this person. Maybe you're a builder, and you've been passing by a neighbor that you know needs your help, and you haven't stopped. Maybe you could. Maybe it's go on a mission trip for the first time. Who knows? Is there danger? Yeah. Could you fail? Sure, you could. But we're given talents. God gives us these talents. And He wants us to invest it back into the kingdom. He doesn't want it to go to waste. The last thing we see in this parable is that there is a sense of urgency. The owner gives the talents out, and before he even gets out of the door, the man with the 5 and the man with the 2 start getting right to work. They're starting to trade off, trying to make more money, and the other guy just waits. He's kind of waiting and burying his money for the perfect situation. If this works out, if someone comes up to me with the best investment opportunity and it seems really safe, then I'll do it. But anything else, I'm going to keep it buried. There's a story, I don't know if you've ever heard of a guy named Francis Chan. He's a pastor, he's an author, and he shared in one of his books this story. It was during the Holocaust. There was a church, and the church was right next to the railroad tracks. Every day during the Holocaust, people were being shipped to these concentration camps right on that railroad past the church. And so there was these screams and moans and all these things going on, horrible things that they were hearing on this train. And the church sat right next to the train tracks. And so what very often happened when they had church on Sunday mornings, the train would go by at the same exact time that church was going on. And so they didn't like hearing that. They didn't like hearing the screams and the cries. It bothered them. And so what they did was they decided to play music really loudly as the train went by, because they knew the exact time. You see, they didn't have a sense of urgencies. They decided to ignore the cries instead. You see, we look at our world. We hear the stories, the violence going on. We hear a lot of things going on in our world. And Jesus calls us to take our gifts and use them with a sense of urgency. Not waiting for the perfect time, not waiting for someone else to do it, but using our gifts now. You know, as Americans in this 21st century, one of the things that churches do that thriving churches, are ones that want to be part of something big, something that Jesus is doing in the world. We see the hurts in the world. We see the change that is needed to happen. And the church that is part of the change that's happening in the world are ones that are striving and doing great things. You see, the disciples who eventually went out after Jesus had died and resurrected, they were world changers. They took their talents and did amazing things with them. They used those gifts. They didn't fear, and they went out and they absolutely lived with a sense of urgency. Like, we have to do it now. So we have these gifts, We have to take steps of faith. Now there are people in the world hurting, and we have to go with urgency. You know, when the owner talked to each of the man who made the investments, he said these words, "Well done, good and faithful servant. Let's go and share in my happiness together." You know, one day, when we are face to face with Jesus, we have used our talents. He is going to say those same words to us. "Well done, good and faithful servants. Let's go share in my happiness together." Let us pray. Lord God, you have given us so much. We have these gifts. Maybe we think that they're not enough. You know that there are. You know that these gifts are enough to make huge changes in this world. Lord, we ask you to help us realize what those gifts are. And give us the courage to go out and share your love to the world and change that world. It's in your glorious name. Amen.
Book of Revelation, chapter 7, verses 16 and 17. Yes, sir. They shall hunger no more, neither shall they thirst anymore. Preach, preacher. For God shall wipe away, yes, sir, every tear from their eye. Yes, sir. Get ready for the revolution. Come on. What you say?